Okay, let me know. Okay. All right, good evening. This is a public hearing of the Legislative Redistricting Advisory Commission. I'm going to just go through a couple of things very quickly, just to introduce the members of the commission and just make a few general statements about redistricting. To my right is Senate President Bill Ferguson. To my left is House Speaker Adrian Jones. To her left is the House Majority Leader Eric Lutke. And to the President's right is President Pro Tem Melanie Griffith. And sitting in for Senator Simon Ayer is Senator Ed Riley, I believe from 33rd District in Anne Arundel County, if I remember correctly. I know. I made a whole career out of nothing. Okay, so I'm going to try and talk through this mask. So basically what I like to say at the beginning of every one of these meetings is that redistricting is complicated and it's an essential thing we have to do. The primary objective is basically one person, one vote, and providing voters the opportunity to vote for candidates of their choice. What we know about population is that it grows, but it doesn't grow evenly. And some areas will gain, some areas will lose, and it's really not a matter of whether you gain or lose, but how that happens in relation to every other area in the state. We know that there are legal and constitutional criteria to be dealt with when drawing districts. They often conflict, and they're somewhat different with respect to legislative and congressional districts. And if you want more information on that, you can check the webpage on the General Assembly's website where the legal standards and constitutional standards are laid out. The diversity of Maryland's population and its geography, both physical and political, are factors adding to the complexity of this task. And so we're going to deal with that as we go forward. Finally, the Maryland General Assembly does have a responsibility under the Constitution and statutes to deal with this issue. And this commission was established to receive public input and to develop congressional legislative districting plans. And we're here to listen. We're going to give those who wish to testify 5 minutes. And we will also be happy to receive anybody's plans either at MD_LRAC on Twitter, or I think it's emailed it to redistricting@mlis.state.md.us. But you can also go to that webpage for more confirmation of that. So on the agenda, the first thing we're going to do is get a briefing on the population situation from Michelle Davis, who is with the Department of Legislative Services and a veteran of redistricting. Michelle, it's all yours. I think the top, there's a...
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good evening, members, chair. I'm Michelle Davis, and I'm going to try to work this PowerPoint here.
The microphone needs to be higher.
I just want to go over a few basics, a few basic numbers to keep in mind for this process that will be important for Baltimore as well as the rest of the state. Um, I'm, I want to remind everyone that this census population for Maryland is slightly different than the total population that we use for redistricting, and that is because we adjust the census population to account for prisoners. And the reason why the number is different is because out-of-state prisoners, people who are incarcerated and they were not Maryland residents when they were incarcerated, were taken out of that total population. So that's why the number is slightly different than the Census Bureau number. And in addition to that, we actually moved. We didn't physically move, but we relocated those prisoners back to their home addresses for apportionment purposes or redistricting purposes. So what you see here in this slide is Maryland's adjusted number, and that is the number to be used whenever you draw maps. If you do that, you would want to use that population. The other numbers below are the ideal district numbers for each type of district. So for a congressional district, senatorial district, or a 2-member delegate or a single-member delegate district, that is sort of the population that you're trying to obtain when you draw a district. Of course, there is some wiggle room for the state legislative districts. Generally, it's minus or plus 5%. For congressional districts, you really don't have any leeway. We literally have to make or draw those 8 districts to be completely equal. Obviously, we have an odd number, so there's going to be at least a 1 or 2 person difference, but not much more than that. This is a map by the Maryland State Department of Planning, and I always like to start with this map because it shows you how the population has changed over the past 10 years. So this is the difference between 2010 and 2020 census numbers. The really dark counties are the ones that grew the most. And on the other end of the spectrum, the yellow counties are the ones that lost population. And then there's some in between. And notice Baltimore City, it lost a lot of population. You can see that there in the middle. In fact, it comes in third in terms of population loss, if you're looking at this map. So what does that mean? Well, that means when we redraw districts this go around in Baltimore City, we're going to be in the same situation that I think that we were in the last 2 times Maryland had to redistrict, and that is the population loss in Baltimore City means less representation, less legislative districts. And in this case, if you take the population that exists now in Baltimore City and sort of calculate based on those ideal numbers that I talked about before, how many districts it would sort of be afforded based on that population. The number right now is 4.49, I believe. And what does that mean? Well, if you compare it to 10 years ago, that number for Baltimore City was, I believe, it's hard for me to see, but I believe that's 5.10, I'm sorry. So Baltimore, in sum, lost is going to lose about a half of a legislative district, if you think of it mathematically. You also have to consider what's going on around you when you're looking at a particular county or the city. And if you look at this map, this is another color-coded map. And the red, of course, means that the current legislative districts are underpopulated. The blue means there are too many people, they're overpopulated. And the green means that they're still within that 5% plus or minus wiggle room. So maybe less has to be done there. But you have to take into account all the growth that has happened in central Maryland, basically, as you can see with this blue. And it's uneven growth, as you can see. So all of that is going to affect what goes on in the Baltimore region, especially Baltimore City. So that's just a sort of an overview of what the commission has to deal with. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Michelle, I thought there was more, because there's always more. So now we'll hear from Julia Nichols Bryan, who I believe is going to represent the Baltimore City League of Women Voters.
Thank you, sir. So is it protocol to take the mask off at this point? Okay, thank you. Good evening, members of the commission. Thank you for your service in this important endeavor. Thank you for coming to Baltimore, to reach out to Baltimore. My name is Julia Nichols Bryan. I'm here as a Baltimore City resident and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Baltimore City. As you've heard from previous speakers at previous hearings representing the League, we strongly support a transparent, inclusive redistricting process, and as such, we so appreciate these hearings. However, we believe more can be done, and our three specific recommendations are that, one, you invite the public to watch when the LRAC works with demographers and experts to draw and evaluate the proposed maps, and two, when you release the maps, that you provide the maps in electronic data format so that citizens can use the available programs to evaluate the proposed maps, shapefile, GeoJSON, and GeoPackage, which I understand your staff is very familiar with. And then the third thing would be to allow the public to have several weeks to comment on your proposed maps. As you know, the League is a nonpartisan organization. We focus on process and encourage you to follow a fair process, one that draws maps consistent with following core principles, and I'm sure you've heard them before at from the various witnesses from the League: compact and contiguous districts, respect for political and natural boundaries, and retention of communities of interest. But we recognize that's not an easy task. Guiding principles often conflict, and as the case in point is Baltimore City. Do you honor political jurisdictions, or do you respect communities of interest? And given that communities of interest often cross political jurisdictions, as they do with Baltimore, it might be appropriate to have the city of Baltimore included in 2 or 3 congressional districts, as it is now. However, we would suggest that particular care be given to the lines that divide the districts. At the present, I know you've all heard all the ridicule of many years about our districts in Maryland. They're drawn in a way that makes really no sense, at least to us as citizens, and in some ways this seems so absurd to undermine the faith in democracy, which we all want to avoid. So looking at Baltimore City districts from a micro perspective, the district boundaries are absurd. For example, one city neighborhood, Bel Air Edison, it's a small community with clearly defined boundaries. It's divided into 3 congressional districts. It's a tiny little area, and one half is in one district, one half is in another, and then there's this narrow little third district right in the middle that in some cases is no more than a block wide. So who do all these 3 congressmen represent? Do they represent this community well? Do people know who to turn to? Does someone have time to prioritize this area? Drawn as it is, it doesn't seem to reflect that. Looking at these 3 congressional districts from a macro perspective, and we as citizens, again, see no logic to the boundaries either. As the Baltimore League's president, Eleanor Green, described in detail in her written statement, which I believe you have, they fail all 3 core principles and sweep Baltimore into 2 to 4 counties each. We're swept into either 2 to 4 counties each, including in 2 of them, counties that are not even contiguous to the Baltimore City. Hartford County for District 2 and Montgomery County for District 3. And the communities of interest, it would be hard to argue, have much in common when you cross that distance. So that's why we recommend you work with citizens as you are here with these hearings. We applaud you holding these hearings. Citizens are willing to help you do that, but we need the sunlight, the data, and the opportunity to do so. That's why we recommend that you allow citizens to observe your work, you release the maps in an electronic data format, and provide an opportunity for citizens to give feedback on your map. There's the question of multi versus single member districts that comes up often, and we recommend that the maps retain the multi-member district where citizens want them. The Maryland League has studied this for many years, and the consensus of the Maryland League is that Maryland is best served by a combination of both single and multi-member districts. But you might find in Baltimore that citizens believe they're better served by multi-member districts. In densely populated areas such as Baltimore, dividing the population into single districts may create absurd lines of division that undermine representation. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who has come in that would like to comment even though they didn't sign up? Okay. We've also received written testimony from a group of district community leaders from Legislative District 41. And I'm just going to summarize what they've said, but we do have the copies here. Basically, their main concern is trying to keep the District 41 together as much as possible. They felt that they've been incredibly well served by the legislative team. These are communities, I'm going to read them even though this is Allendale Community, Roland Park, Lyndhurst Improvement Association, Falstaff Improvement Association, Glen Neighborhood Improvement Association, Poplar Hill Association, and Uplands Homeowners Association. They said that good things have happened at keeping them all together, and basically they'd like to maintain and build that district back up with the necessary population to meet standard. And I think that's probably about as much summarization as I can give you right now. So we don't have anybody else. We are going to, I think I can say we're going to try to have some congressional maps out by middle of November for public comment. And that's really all we have for tonight. Unless anybody on the commission has anything they'd like to say, we're good to go. Okay, well, thank you for being here. We'll see you next time.